When I married Alexander, I knew it was his second marriage and that he had a daughter with his ex-wife. I blame my youth for not taking this seriously. I only saw that he was a man of good character, responsible, mature, and considerate, so I was confident we could build a happy marriage together. 2 years into our marriage, his daughter fell ill, needed a parent-teacher meeting, and said she missed her dad. He returned to his ex-wife time and again, like a migratory bird. Absent during my illness, forgetting our anniversaries, leaving abruptly during countless dates with me. Only then did I realize that his sense of responsibility toward others came at my expense. On our wedding anniversary date, Alexander, his ex-wife's call came as usual. Ringing urgently like a death knell, he rose with both apology and guilt in his heart. I clutched Alexander's sleeve, my voice trembling with grievance and complaint. "Does she really need you to go right now? Don't go, please." His expression turned helpless as he looked at me with reproach. "You're not a mother yet, you wouldn't understand." He left anyway, leaving behind only the hurried sight of his retreating figure. Looking at the empty seat across the dining table, I gently touched my slightly rounded belly, murmuring to myself, "But soon, I'll be a mother too." Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. For Alexander S. and my second wedding anniversary, he actually put in some thought. He booked that same French restaurant where we had our first date. He reserved the entire place, even ordering the exact same dishes as before. The menu has changed several times over the years. He must have specially arranged it with the head chef. This kind of romance that pays attention to every minute detail would have moved me to tears in the past, but now, sitting across the long table, I knew all too well that the distance between us was far more than just this table. Alexander had just pushed the orange box toward me when his phone rang. Seeing the mockery in my eyes, he hesitated noticeably but answered anyway. "I'm busy right now." On the other end of the phone came the tearful voice of his ex-wife Bertha. "I know you're busy, but Carol fell off her bike and keeps crying for you." Alexander instantly stiffened, standing up so abruptly that the cups and saucers clattered noisily. "Did you remove her training wheels? I told you she wasn't steady enough yet." After hanging up the phone, Alexander gave me an apologetic glance and pushed the gift box toward me again. He said meekly, "I asked Kate about this bag. She said you've been liking it recently. Carol over there really worries me. Bertha can't handle it alone." I didn't speak, just silently ate my dessert with my head lowered. He perfunctorily said, "Order whatever you want to eat," then turned and left. I had long grown accustomed to it. Whenever my ex-wife and child need something, being there for me always comes second. At 10 in the evening, perhaps from eating fish that wasn't fresh, I was hunched over the toilet vomiting violently. Alexander still hadn't returned, gasping for breath as I rinsed my mouth. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Alexander's weary voice came through. "I won't be able to come back these couple of days. Carol's grandmother is in the final stages of cancer, and we've been keeping my divorce from Bertha a secret from her. These past couple days, the old lady's condition has taken a turn for the worse, and Carol begged me through tears to accompany them back for a few days." Listening to the sound of car noises from the other end of the line, I suddenly laughed. "So the three of you are already on the road, and only now you're telling me." My chest felt tight, and I hung up before he could say anything. The company was relocating, and he'd clearly promised to help me tomorrow. Now he must have forgotten all about it. The next evening, Alexander called to ask how the move was going. In the background, chaos and wailing mingled. The old man must have already passed. His voice was also full of exhaustion. He must have stayed up all night with his ex-wife. In the face of life and death, nothing is trivial. I didn't say much. Just told him to rest before hanging up. Perhaps it was the exhaustion from moving, but I felt genuinely unwell, so I booked an appointment through the Mina program. 3 days later Alexander returned to City Y, and his first priority was rushing back to the office to tackle the backlog of work. I arrived home at dusk. Just as I was stepping through the door, he tentatively reached out to hug me, even his embrace radiating exhaustion. "You've worked hard these past few days, dear." Holding a large bag of groceries, I managed a faint smile. "Elsie is off today. I was planning to cook and had something to tell you. Seeing you like this, you should rest first." Only after confirming I wasn't angry did he relax, taking off his coat and sinking into the sofa. "All right, I must support my wife's cooking, but I really..." Before finishing his sentence, he was already asleep with his head tilted to one side. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes and casually tossed the bag of groceries into the kitchen. As the son-in-law, having to take care of that mother-daughter pair must be exhausting. I clutched the medical report, hesitating several times. but ultimately didn't wake him. The next day was the weekend, and I no longer felt like cooking, so I asked Alexander to go out for a meal together. He knew he was in the wrong, so he cancelled a few meetings, kept his phone on silent the whole way, and cautiously tried to steer the conversation. I chose a quiet Japanese restaurant. The sukiyaki pot bubbled away, slightly soothing my restless mood. As I set down the menu, he slyly slid a brocade box across the table from underneath. Inside was a gold bracelet engraved with the character for fortune. I just liked this new model on my friend's circle yesterday. I closed the box and looked up at him. Without a word, he smiled and lowered his head to help me stir the sterile egg mixture. The dim yellow light made his features appear especially gentle, and somehow my anger subsided a little. Maybe it's time to tell him. I had just begun to smile and say, "Let me tell you something." Then I saw Alexander glance at his phone screen with an expression of impatience, though more than that, unease. "Bertha has called over 20 times. I'm worried something might have happened to Carol. Do you mind if I step out to call back?" The meat in the sukiyaki pot had already changed color. I set down my chopsticks and looked at him. He called back, shuffling out of the private room in his slippers. I waited quietly. The meat in the pot had long gone tough. The expression on his face when he returned was all too familiar, a little guilty, but mostly distracted, watching him hesitate to speak. I suddenly felt utterly exhausted. "Alexander, if you leave today, I swear you'll regret it, Jennifer," he said with obvious displeasure. "Don't be like this. Carol has a fever, and Bertha can't handle it alone." I snorted derisively. "She has no friends, no relatives, can't afford a nurse." Alexander's eyes burned with anger that overshadowed his guilt as he stared coldly at me. "I am Carol's father. You," he turned to change his shoes. I understood his unfinished words. "Not your own child, so of course you don't care, right? Some matters are more urgent than others, and mine are never his top priority." A moment later, the waitress pushed the door open to add more soup. Noticing one less person in the private room and the barely touched dishes, she pursed her lips and asked softly, "Miss, would you like to take these away? Are you almost finished here?" I looked at her, unable to tell whether the misty haze came from the steam above the pot or the fog before my eyes, and nodded. "It's almost over." The next evening, Bertha came to the house. She knocked on the door and gave me a gentle nod, but her gaze traveled over my shoulder to survey the house. This is a 2-story villa where Alexander and I moved in after getting married. Every corner was decorated by my own hands, though it clearly didn't quite meet her aesthetic standards. But right now, what really grates on me is her uninvited presence. "What do you want?" She withdrew her gaze, a faint smile curling at the corners of her lips. "Carol's dad will wait until her fever breaks before coming back. I'm here to get him some clean clothes." I turned and nodded to the housekeeper. "Elsie, could you please bring that black suitcase from the walk-in closet?" I pushed the suitcase forward. "There should be enough here for him to change." Span. She calmly took it, glanced at Elsie, and looked at me with even more complicated eyes. "All right." I was about to close the door when she reached out to stop me, biting her lip and squeezing out a whisper. "Back then, when we first got married, he also promised to make me a little garden." I didn't understand why she was telling me this. Did she want me, of all people? "Do you feel guilty about someone Alexander only met 2 years after his divorce?" Elsie walked over in a few steps. "Our madam needs to rest now." With that, she slammed the door shut for me with a bang. I chuckled. "Elsie, have you been watching too many short dramas lately?" "Why call me madam?" Elsie is the housekeeper I hired before marriage, now wearing an expression of exasperation at my inability to meet her expectations. "Jennifer, you're just too soft-hearted. When an ex-wife comes knocking at your door, can't you see what she's really after?" I gave a bitter smile. How could I not see it? Bertha has used her daughter as an excuse to half-seriously propose reconciliation more than once or twice. The key issue isn't with her, it's Alexander. Elsie poured a cup of hot milk, her gaze sweeping over my stomach with both pity and anger. "Haven't told President Song yet." I shook my head, stubborn. In the evening, Alexander called to ask if I was asleep. "Where are you right now?" "At a hotel near Carol's place. Work's been hectic these 2 days. Carol cries whenever she wakes up and doesn't see me. I really can't get away." His weary voice carried a note of reassurance. "That day at the Japanese restaurant was my fault. I'm sorry." "Did you see the transfer?" I did receive a substantial transfer in the afternoon, typical of his usual approach. Suddenly, I felt a lump in my throat. "Alexander, can you come back?" Jennifer," he interrupted me, trying to sound gentle but unable to hide his weariness. "You've always been understanding. Give me a few more days." "All right, get some rest." The dial tone declared yet another time he'd chosen someone else. from the moment we got together. I'd been constantly understanding, those 2 words pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. To outsiders, even as a divorcee, he remained the handsome, wealthy model husband, dutiful to his ex-wife and children, considerate to me, living a life almost beyond reproach. Only I knew that beneath the facade of marital bliss, this marriage was already riddled with cracks. Alexander returned at dawn 2 days later. I had been working late nights consecutively and took the morning off to catch up on sleep. When I woke, I found him half kneeling by the bed, one hand gripping my wrist tightly, his forehead resting against the bedside. I had just withdrawn my hand when he woke up. Alexander gently pressed down to keep me from getting up, brushed aside the hair by my ear, and asked in a hoarse voice, "Awake? Are you feeling unwell? What would you like to eat?" I didn't want to respond to him. "I just wanted to get up," he sighed, shifted his posture but remained kneeling, then tilted his head to kiss the back of my hand. His eyes were slightly red, perhaps from staying up late. "Why didn't you tell me? Looks like Elsie got tired of my hesitation and spoke for me. I only just found out myself. Let me get up." He quickly helped me sit up, his hand never leaving my shoulder. "What would you like to eat? Elsie's cooking tends to be salty. So I've hired a professional to prepare meals for pregnant women. Elsie will still stay here to keep you company. I've also hired someone to take care of the yard, so you don't have to bend over and fiddle with the flowers anymore. Your work is too demanding. Why not quit and come work with me?" He rambled on, the exhaustion of recent days seemingly washed away by this news. He was happy, but all the arrangements were handled with effortless ease. After all, it wasn't the first time. A sour ache welled up in my heart. "Jennifer." Alexander noticed my mood, stopped mid-sentence, and leaned in to kiss me. I dodged, and he tightened his grip on my hand again, another warm palm pressed against my abdomen, his gaze earnest. "I know these days have been hard for you, but I promise, I'll treat this child as well as I treat Carol." His eyes held a rare plea. "Don't be angry anymore, okay? It's not good for your health. You can punish me however you want. As long as it's within my power." I just slowly withdrew my hand and looked at him. "Then will you tell Bertha and Carol?" His eyes darkened instantly, his hesitant attitude saying it all. The bitterness in my heart spread, turning into a cold smile at the corners of my mouth. "What? Is our child something to be ashamed of? Or do you think I should keep being understanding?" He hurriedly cut me off. "What's there to hide? Everyone in the company has known you're the boss's wife since the engagement." I shook off his hand, forcing him to grip my shoulders and make me face him. "When the child gets older, around 1 or 2 years old, Carol will naturally come to accept having a little brother or sister." Digging my nails into my palms, I finally screamed at him. What right does anyone have to make my child, born properly within our marriage, wait for others' acceptance? What right does anyone have to make me, who did nothing wrong, bear responsibility for his failed marriage just because I married him?" Alexander, his gaze turned colder as he tightened his grip to calm me down, fixing me with that corporate management stare. Then he finally said those words that had probably been rehearsed countless times in his heart. "You knew all this before we got married, Jennifer. I never lied to you." The argument ended with us sleeping in separate rooms, followed by an even more suffocating Cold War. Exhausted from early pregnancy and consecutive high-pressure workdays, I practically collapsed into sleep the moment my head hit the pillow, but the phone ringing in another room still woke me up in the middle of the night. Even with the door shut tight and the blankets pulled over my head, Bertha's drunken sobs still found their way in. I was long used to it. My birthday, our anniversary, Valentine's Day or Mid-Autumn Festival, there was always some scene like this. I was just about to bury my head and go back to sleep when the bedroom door was pushed open. Alexander tiptoed in. As if testing whether I was asleep, I simply sat up and looked at him. We happened to be wearing the matching pajamas we bought during our honeymoon. The current face-off was particularly ironic. Bertha got drunk again. He broke the silence, lowering his eyes as he spoke. "Carol is home alone. I'll go check on her and be right back." I looked at the coat already draped over his arm and asked him, "You know I'd get angry, right?" He pressed his lips together. The days of Cold War had left exhaustion between his brows, yet his manner remained gentle and resolute. "Don't overthink it. Carol is still young. I'll be back soon. You're pregnant, get some proper rest." Leaning against the second-floor railing, I watched the Teru Bozu by the entrance sway gently as he closed the door. That was what we brought back from our first trip together, at the fireworks festival. He smiled at me and said every day from then on would be sunny for us. But the sky won't clear anymore. Next time we meet face to face, I'll bring up divorce with him. For once I got off work on time the next day. Kate dragged me to a cafe after her workout. She said Bertha had probed her yesterday, having seen Alexander buying lots of supplements, and asked if I was pregnant. I stirred the cream on my cake. Surprised at first before suddenly understanding, no wonder there was that scene last night. Kate took away my coffee and replaced it with hot milk. I said anyway I'm going to be the godmother, and her face instantly turned as black as a pot's bottom. Sorry to put you through this. Having to deal with her pestering for my sake, Kate cut off my polite remarks, tearing open a sugar packet impatiently. There's one question I've asked you countless times since you started dating, Jennifer. What on earth do you see in Alexander? I press my lips together and look out the window. Outside, it's as hot as summer. The warm wind carries the chirping of insects, and lush trees cast cooling shade for passers-by. I chose Alexander precisely for this kind of shade. I was born into a family that never wanted me in the first place. My birth mother was too young to shoulder the responsibilities of marriage and ran away when I was just 1 month old. My father naturally remarried, and soon had younger siblings with my stepmother. My name was given by my grandfather. He said I was born at night and that my fate was bitter, drifting like flowing water. So he named me Jennifer, a pun meaning that in this life, I shouldn't seek great wealth or honor, but simply flow quietly like a stream under the moonlight. I really should stay quiet and not bother anyone, from a very young age. I knew I had to study desperately hard, only then could I force a smile from them amidst the exclamation, "Your eldest is so studious," and earn myself a bite to eat, just enough strength to struggle my way out. Even now, I still remember one evening in high school when I went to the mahjong parlor to ask my father for tuition money. He had just lost a game, grabbed a handful of tiles, and hurled them at me, cursing me as a jinx. Numbly, I returned home, spreading my homework on my stepmother's dowry chest while the aroma of dinner wafted from behind me, my younger siblings eagerly gathering around. I knew there would be no leftovers for me again that day. The tear stains in my notebook never fully dried, even by the time I graduated with my master's degree. After living alone in City Y, cutting ties with my hometown, except for Kate, was what finally improved my state of mind. I met Alexander on a spring day when willow catkins filled the air. Just after I joined the business department of my company, Alexander's company specialized in software development, and they handled our company's financial system. Payday arrived, but the system crashed. The finance department couldn't reach the maintenance programmer. Facing potential siege from employees, they had to ask the business department to intervene. Nobody wanted this task. Everyone thought a few days' delay in payroll wasn't a big deal. When the manager walked over, my newbie buff activated, and I felt the glorious mission had finally landed on my shoulders. Confirming that the software maintenance contract hadn't expired, I marched straight to their company. When I couldn't get through by phone, the receptionist ignored me, so with the fearless audacity of a newborn calf, I planted myself right in front of the so-called president song they kept mentioning. Alexander sighed as he saw me persist relentlessly. Stopping his assistant who was about to lose his temper, "Let's go," he said. And then what happened? Kate finally showed some interest. She never understood why I'd choose a divorced man before, especially disliking any mention of that past. I scooped a bite of her millfuel. It was sweet. Both the cake and that time in our lives. That night, he and the programmer worked until late, finally getting the system back online. "Payroll can go out once the bank opens tomorrow," he said. Patting the young programmer's shoulder while addressing me, I stared at the contract, breaking out in a cold sweat. The contract had actually expired 2 years ago. I'd misread the year in my morning rush, which meant this company had been maintaining our systems for free these past 2 years, only ignoring us recently because they were swamped, and I'd gone and pestered their CEO about it. After mentally cursing the finance department a dozen times, I swallowed hard. Noticing the bloodshot eyes of the two men before me, "Let me treat you to some late-night snacks." After a few beers, the programmer finally started venting about our business department, saying they act like nothing's wrong when asking for system maintenance. I chuckled sheepishly. Alexander, who hadn't been drinking, pushed the tofu soup toward me. "The system was developed by us, so we have to take responsibility for the trouble." He stopped us from drinking anymore and stood up to pay the bill. "Just like Miss Yin, you're not from the finance department, yet you stepped up to take responsibility, didn't you?" I nodded repeatedly, saying, "Thank you, President Song. You're the most responsible boss I've ever met." He made sure to drop each of us off at home. The house I rented was deep in an alley where cars couldn't enter. When I got out of the car, he frowned and asked me to add him as a friend. "Remember to move to a safer neighborhood next time. Let me know when you're home." In the quiet alley, insects chirped incessantly. Slightly tipsy, I watched his car lights slowly disappear. A cicada in my heart suddenly let out a cry, buzzing and reverberating. Later, we happened to meet on a weekend, and he was surprised to see me wearing 2 masks while grocery shopping. Doesn't it feel stuffy? I shook my head. Poets say willow catkins filling the sky herald spring's charm, but for me, it's pure torment. The moment those fluffy things touch me, my face swells up like a pig's head. Seeing the groceries in my hand, he laughed and said he also enjoyed dishes from my hometown. Naturally, we started chatting occasionally. I learned about his marital history. He didn't hide it, recounting it calmly during our third deep conversation. He had dated the intelligent and beautiful Bertha in college, smoothly married after graduation, and achieved modest success in starting a business together, a match made in heaven. Later, the company ran into trouble. Bertha had just given birth to Carol 6 months prior, a time when marital bonds are most fragile, utterly unable to withstand external shocks. Back and forth, exhausted, Bertha crossed the line with the senior who had a crush on her since college and filed for divorce. Alexander didn't know if he could survive it at the time, agreed, and gave everything to Bertha and Carol. Fate was kind. Alexander caught a few business opportunities, and his company came back to life. Bertha broke up with the senior, silently wanting to reconcile, saying the child couldn't grow up without a father. Alexander adored his daughter deeply, yet refused to remarry, saying, "I'm truly terrified of the constant arguments." But for Carol's sake, he did his utmost. A generous monthly allowance arrived punctually. He regularly arranged overseas trips to broaden the mother-daughter pair's horizons, and no matter how busy, he religiously carved out half a weekend day to spend with his daughter. When selecting a kindergarten, he cancelled all work commitments to personally attend trial classes at each potential school. Remarrying would mean Carol growing up amidst quarrels, while not remarrying meant raising her in a single-parent household. The sight of his daughter filled him with guilt. He'd willingly give his life for her. Naturally, he had no interest in remarrying either. Alexander never lacked romantic encounters, having brief flings several times, but each time Bertha showed up clutching Carol and wailing at him, he'd simply let it go. He'd never get the chance to tell me that cliché line "until I met you." Before meeting him, I never thought about marriage, but after talking with Alexander, I finally understood that there could be such a man in this world. That there could be such a father in this world. 5-year-old me stood wailing in the endless fog, begging 25-year-old me to find someone to love her. So from walks to dates, from coffee shops to grocery markets, he probed my heart step by step, then gradually occupied the fortress. On some ordinary afternoon, Alexander confessed to me earnestly, "I know you have simpler choices than me, but if you'd give me a chance, I'll take good care of you." I tilted my head to look at him. The light from outside spilled over him like a golden net, yet it was me who felt ensnared. Alexander gradually made me feel so secure that I forgot how to cry. Kate had never liked him, but she admitted I was becoming more cheerful. Alexander didn't hide this romance from Bertha, only sternly advising her to stop teaching Carol to speak nonsense. Alexander's proposal also came on a spring day when peach and plum blossoms bloomed. We both loved that lakeside cafe, a 2-story wooden cottage with a willow branch dipping into the veranda, as if sitting inside an ink painting. I never dared to go in spring, afraid of willow catkins. I was puzzled by his choice of meeting place, but went anyway, amidst a sea of blooming flowers. He stood smiling at me under a tree not far away, and that great willow tree had been replaced with a lifelike artificial one. The drifting catkins transformed into bubbles dancing wildly through the air. As I removed my mask and stepped closer, his eyes were as red as mine. He knelt on one knee, gazing deep into my eyes. "Jennifer," he called my name firmly, "I want to accompany you through all 4 seasons, shielding you from the world's chaos. Grant me this blessing, will you?" I closed my eyes, letting the scalding tears fall. After saying these words, my tear stains had dried, and I slipped the ring off onto the table. Kate said no more, only giving me a tight hug, unknowingly. Alexander and I have been married for over 2 years. I never doubted his love in this marriage. It was only after everything had settled that he naturally stitched other fabrics into the quilt meant for our marriage. As we covered ourselves with it, the roughness made my whole body ache. This suffocating feeling of grinding flesh and blood reached its peak when Bertha appeared in my hospital room days later. My hospital admission wasn't a big deal, just a routine rear-end collision. The doctor suggested observation for 2 days. Alexander burst into the ward in such panic and directed such fury at the rear-end collision driver that I nearly forgot we were in the middle of a Cold War. "Sorry about this." The driver apologized with a pained expression. "I just spaced out for a moment. I'll cover all the medical expenses. Who wants your damn medical fees?" Alexander nearly growled through clenched teeth, staring at me with heartache for a long moment before turning back. If anything happens to my wife and child, I won't let you off. This attitude contrasted starkly with the resolute figure he'd cut when walking away that day, a bitter irony that made me chuckle softly as I motioned for the man to leave first. The doctor said I'm fine. Besides, President Song must be terribly busy. Who dared disturb you? My barb made the veins on the back of his hand bulge. Your dashcam is linked to my account. Jennifer, stop being angry, okay? He opened the bird's nest he brought and pushed it toward me pleadingly. I was scared to death today. I was about to say something when the door was knocked. The knocking and the door opening happened almost simultaneously. It was Bertha. She has Alexander's car access because Carol said she's used to riding in Alexander's car and often borrows it. Phew, I followed the car to the building and asked around several wards before finding you, Bertha panted, casually closing the door behind her. Jennifer, are you feeling better? Alexander frowned, instinctively stepping in front of me. What do you want? Bertha naturally showed wifely reproach. What do you think? The call wouldn't go through, so I had to find someone. Carol's parent-teacher conference, she said you pinky promised. Have you forgotten everything? Alexander suddenly realized and instinctively looked at me. I let out a cold laugh. Under our exchanged gaze, he withdrew his probing look and gently shook his head at Bertha. You go this time. Bertha immediately stopped smiling, glanced at me, and then looked aggrieved. What, Alexander? The little one isn't even born yet. And you're already neglecting Carol. Alexander opened his mouth to speak but was swiftly cut off as she stood up for her daughter. Carol keeps saying Aunt Jennifer is her favorite, and now you're ganging up on her like this. What nonsense. Alexander frowned tightly. My wife is under hospital observation. Can't you go there for once? I don't care. Bertha shot me a glance, suppressing a sob. Carol still doesn't know you're about to have a new child. If you don't go today, I won't keep it a secret anymore. It's true what they say, a stepmother brings a stepfather. Enough, I coldly cut her off. Clutching my stomach to suppress the discomfort. Get out. Bertha froze, probably not expecting me to be so blunt, and immediately looked at Alexander, seeing him only walk over to press the call button. Bertha's face flushed with anger. Fine, I'm leaving, you take good care of the baby. The door slammed shut, and I spoke wearily, whether you follow or not is up to you. Alexander held my shoulder, his gaze following me. I'll be back in 2 hours at most. Call me immediately if anything comes up. Alright, he pushed away the already cooled bird's nest soup. This has gone cold, I'll have them make a fresh batch and send it over. The door closed again, louder than when Bertha had slammed it. Suddenly I remembered how Alexander and I had snuggled together beneath the snow-capped mountains during our honeymoon. At that time, my eyes and nose were red from the cold, while scolding me for not wearing a scarf just to take photos. He pulled me tightly into his embrace. I told you, being with me won't make your eyes turn red. Perhaps he never changed. From the very beginning, what he wanted was a gentle wife who could soothe the wounds of his first failed marriage. Someone to continuously replenish his capacity to love and heal the scars left by his ex-wife. And I, reaching out from the swamp of a loveless youth, clung desperately to him. What I truly needed was a savior who would take responsibility for me. But now I understand, for the first 28 years of my life, and for the decades to come, the only one who can remain steadfast and take responsibility for me is myself. After taking some time to recover, I got up and checked myself out of the hospital. Then I requested a long leave from work and called Elsie to take some time off. Before leaving, I asked her to pack up my belongings at home and store them in a warehouse for a while. I sighed as I looked at the blacklist. Pulled out my SIM card, changed my number, and dialed Kate. Save this number, then send me the location of that resort in your hometown from last time. She had mentioned that the place was nestled between mountains and water, with white walls and black tiles, a lush, secluded paradise. She sent me the location of a county under M City, still joking over the phone. Why not go abroad to relax when you're upset? What's so great about a small village? I chuckled softly. It's not for relaxation. It's for postpartum recovery. The laughter on the other end of the phone instantly faded. After several deep breaths, she finally realized I wasn't joking. Are you really sure about this? I gave a vague hum. I hired someone to accompany me for the surgery in the city. If you're not superstitious about it and have time, she scolded me. Hire your ass. Even if I'm busy, I'll come with you. The scolding warmed my heart, and I genuinely smiled, chatting with her a while longer. After hanging up, Elsie sent a message saying she was all ready. Alexander came back in the middle and found out, stopping her from packing my things and demanding to know where I'd gone. threatening to call the police if she didn't tell him. I didn't say anything. Just told him I needed to take some time off because I wasn't feeling well, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Her tone shifted to concern. I made you pigeon soup, where are you now? I was already driving on the highway toward M-City, my eyes slightly reddening. No need, Elsie, I won't be needing it anymore. Kate soon called me too, saying Alexander had come looking for me. I've sent the divorce papers to his email, he's seen them. I told her not to bother with him, I'll contact him after the surgery. She sighed and said he was going crazy with worry, but she thought he kind of deserved it. Where was he earlier? After hanging up, I focused on driving. The navigation showed nearly 10 more hours to go with traffic. After driving for a long time, I was considering where to stop for the night when I heard the car behind me honking incessantly. I checked my speed again. Clearly both the car and road conditions were completely normal. Yet the honking not only continued but grew more urgent, nearly incessant as it tailgated me. Frowning, I searched for the vehicle behind me in the rearview mirror, catching sight of that familiar midnight blue. My breath hitched. After steadying myself, I focused harder on the license plate. Yes, Alexander. It immediately dawned on me with frustration. It was the dashcam account, which could show real-time location tracking. Between handling hospital discharge procedures, searching for Elsie, and consulting about the surgery, I'd completely forgotten to unbind it. Pursing my lips, I pressed the accelerator, switched to the far left lane, and tried to speed away from him. Pam immediately accelerated as well, clinging tightly to my tail, pulling alongside me several times, flashing her hazards and honking frantically. I knew she wouldn't dare cut me off, so I deliberately jerked the steering wheel hard, weaving an S-curve toward the guardrail side. She indeed got scared and immediately slowed down. Seizing this opening, I left her behind, racing forward at the very edge of the speed limit, but she soon stomped the gas and caught up again. This time she didn't dare get too close, yet despite 7 or 8 lane changes, I couldn't shake her off. I realized this couldn't go on, this speed wasn't sustainable, and an accident was inevitable sooner or later. At the very least, I shouldn't drag innocent people into it. If he wanted to talk, then we'd talk. So I signaled, slowed down, and took an exit ramp. He understood and quickly followed. About 10 minutes later, we parked one after another in front of a bamboo grove. There wasn't a soul around, just the rustling of bamboo leaves in the wind. He slammed the car door shut with force after getting out, rushing over in a few quick strides and pinning me against the door the moment I stepped out. His face ashen as if veiled in a layer of grey mist. Are you out of your mind? Driving that fast? Do you have a death wish? My shoulder ached from his grip, and as I struggled free, I retorted helplessly, if you hadn't chased me, I would have slowed down long ago, furious to the point of laughter. His grip didn't loosen in the slightest. You think I won't chase after you? Just let you throw a divorce agreement at me and run off with our child? He took a deep breath to suppress his temper, his tone softening slightly. Jennifer, stop making a scene. I just went to the kindergarten and came right back. Even now, he still thinks it's just the parent-teacher meeting that pissed me off, but I'm truly exhausted, too tired to even list grievances, let alone muster the energy for an argument. Alexander, after the divorce, you won't have to exhaust yourself between 2 lives anymore. Wouldn't that be better? No. He nearly growled through clenched teeth. Jennifer, don't even think about it. I laughed. So you're saying since I've endured for 2 years, I should just keep enduring? A flicker of confusion passed through his eyes, yet his grip on me remained unyielding. These past 2 years, have I done so poorly? I believe the confusion in his eyes was genuine. From his perspective, he had truly done his best. But Alexander, your balancing act came at my expense, didn't it? All to maintain the illusion of peace, rather than fighting, arguing, and torturing each other. It's better for one person to let go first. I shook my head and spoke hoarsely. Let go of me first. Only then did he snap out of it and release my shoulders, but immediately grabbed my wrist instead, pulling me back. Come home with me. Leave your car here, I'll have someone drive it back. I refuse, I said, shaking him off with such force that his brows furrowed tightly. Jennifer, Alexander, I need to sort some things out. I paused, softening my tone slightly, deciding to shake him off first, otherwise nothing would get done. The doctor also said I need rest. I believe it would be better for us to spend some time apart. His expression softened slightly with my tone, and he reluctantly came to a stop. Then, what if I move out for a while? Will you go back home? My heart's been in my throat with you out here. I shook my head, maintaining a resolute silence. Ignoring my attempts to push him away, he pulled me tightly into his embrace. Then I'll take you there. His palm pressed against my lower abdomen. Jennifer, Don't say the word divorce again. And don't touch our child, okay? I couldn't agree to either, trying to push him away only to be held tighter. It's too far, no need to waste time going back and forth. Carol, what if she needs you for something? I pulled out my most effective tactic, a compromise. I won't block you anymore, and I'll send you my location and new number. Happy now? Only then did he release me, staring intently into my eyes as if convinced our bond was still unbreakable, and nodded. I got in the car to leave. And just as I pulled the door shut, he suddenly called out to me. Dusk was falling, and his features were barely discernible under the bamboo grove, but his voice was strained. Jennifer, there are many things I know I went too far with. When you come back, I promise it'll be different. I merely glanced at him before continuing to get into the car, driving away from the bamboo grove, driving away from him. But I won't be coming back, Alexander. I didn't arrive in M-City until dusk the next day. Throughout the journey, he kept calling and video chatting incessantly. I maintained a ratio of answering 1 out of every 10 calls, vaguely claiming poor signal reception. The resort owner also contacted me. Alexander had sent over numerous tonics and gifts, paid all my accommodation fees in advance, and even paid extra to have recipes delivered. He'd reserved the most spacious suite for me and asked when I'd arrive. I stared at the payment slip in my hand, silent for a long time. The day after tomorrow, the night before hospitalization, Kate arrived. She said she supported my divorce, but asked me to carefully consider whether I truly didn't want the child. Maybe I should just scare him. It's already been 18 weeks. She looked at me with concern. This decision was mine to make, yet it felt like a sharp knife scraping my heart, leaving it raw and bleeding. These past few nights, sleep has been elusive. Each time I thought I'd drifted off, I'd wake to find my pillow soaked through, unable to let go. I was wrong. Had I woken up sooner, I wouldn't have dragged us into this mess, harming this little sapling that never got to see the light of day. I've made up my mind. I choked out the words. If this child is really born, it'll just become more proof of how he's wronged his eldest daughter. I wouldn't need to do anything else in this life, just keep making scenes to get him home more often. Fighting over who gets more or less. Tears rolled down my chin and disappeared into the dark fabric of my clothes. Besides, since I've truly given up on him, why leave behind such a bond to keep us entangled? Isn't his ex-wife living proof of that? My childhood was like a damp, dark room, and I always thought meeting Alexander was like finding a light in that darkness, inevitably fraught with hopes and fears. Opening my eyes, that room was but a tiny corner of the world. While the rest of life stretched out like endless rivers and mountains, Kate tightly grasped my hand, her voice choked with tears. As long as you've thought it through, I'll be with you every step of the way. At dawn, an unfamiliar alternate account suddenly sent me a voice call. In my daze, I thought it was a colleague whose number I hadn't saved. It wasn't until the person on the other end hurled a few curses that I recognized it was Bertha. I was speechless that she'd been spying on me with a secondary account for so long. No wonder her dramatic antics always seemed to coincidentally happen at the perfect time. I also understood the implication from her end. Today marked the 7th day, 49th day, since the passing of her mother, Carol's grandmother. By rights, Alexander should have accompanied them back, but he only sent a driver, saying his presence wasn't necessary. Bertha believes I'm the one who stirred up trouble, making her and her mother appear so pitiful during today's solitary memorial. What kind of person are you? She gnashed her teeth and said, not even bothering to pretend anymore. Are you? There was no need to preserve any decorum either, so I coldly retorted. Who are you to lecture me on how to behave? If you've got so much free time, why not keep fabricating excuses to cling on to your ex-husband? With those words, I hung up and immediately blocked her. Compared to verbal arguments, what lay ahead was the hardest to endure, no matter how unbearable. After 48 hours, everything would be over. In the final moments, I trembled from the pain, yet could only be grateful that induced labor didn't allow for anesthesia. I had to endure it raw. It's what I deserve. I'm sorry, my baby. This mother isn't worthy of keeping you. Go choose another mother. Okay, this time, pick more carefully. Choose parents who cherish each other, and be their only child, so they can love you purely. I didn't dare, nor could I bear to look at that mass of flesh. The doctor swiftly cleaned up and whispered, it's a boy. Tears that hadn't fallen even in excruciating pain suddenly streamed down. It was the little boy I'd envisioned during my newlywed days, one that would belong just to us two. Back then, I'd imagined in my heart how he'd have his father's features and my eyes. We'd already chosen a nickname back then, March, because his parents fell in love during that gentle, balmy spring. My March has ended. I close my eyes and let my ears fill with tears. From then on, the catkins fell completely, the music ended and the crowd dispersed. Kate stayed by my side the whole time, continuously wiping away my tears. Cry it out, it's all over. The doctor said you can be discharged once everything checks out. She fed me chicken soup, her brows furrowed with worry. Your phone keeps ringing, it's Alexander. I think he's about to track you down. She wasn't wrong, Alexander found me a day later. It took me about a day to recover somewhat. March's final kindness was leaving without a trace. After examination, the doctor said no further cleaning was needed and prescribed some medication, telling me to go home and rest properly. Kate dropped me off at the resort and left, telling me to rest well and that she'd take time off to come keep me company. The village was tranquil and cool. As I leaned against the railing lost in thought, I spotted Alexander's car pulling up in front. Clearly unable to reach me by phone, he had driven non-stop to get here. He looked weary, but more than that, anxious and angry. I hung up the phone and looked at him. He saw me too, and the moment he took in my expression, he froze. Kate said my face was pale enough to play Sadako directly as she left, and it seems she wasn't wrong. His steps were unsteady as he approached, his eyes filled with disbelief as he looked at me. Jennifer. His eyes were bloodshot, his gaze shifting from my abdomen to my eyes before he spoke in a trembling voice, bitter with disbelief. Tell me it's not what I think. I met his gaze and answered him succinctly, it's exactly what you think. His eyes instantly reddened completely, the shock and pain in them nearly drowning him until he could barely breathe. Then he grabbed me tightly and pinned me against the railing, letting out a hoarse, uncontrollable roar. Why, Jennifer, how could you be so cruel? He was on the verge of breaking down, his trembling fingers still gripping me. Fucking tell me how you could do this. I didn't have the strength to push him away now, nearly suffocated by his pressure as I gasped for breath while speaking. Alexander, I said, let's get a divorce. You always say I'm not considerate enough. A faint smile tugged at the corner of my lips. I've sacrificed half my life to accommodate your happy family of 3. Is that considerate enough for you? Noticing my unsteadiness, he snapped out of his daze and released me, his complexion now as pale as mine. I don't want to. He mumbled, clutching my waist tightly as he buried his face in the crook of my neck, his voice already choked with sobs. Boy or girl? I was just about to speak when he abruptly hugged me tighter, cutting me off. Don't say it, I don't want to know. Mentioning the child wrenched my heart as well, though I didn't regret it. I steadied my emotions as best I could before speaking. The divorce, I'm serious about it. Let's both move on. You can keep being your. Before I could finish speaking, he suddenly scooped me up in his arms. I immediately frowned and struggled, but my body had no strength. Don't move. He kicked the door open, carried me inside, and placed me on the bed, pressing down on my shoulders to stop me from getting up. Divorce? Don't even think about it. He brushed the hair from my forehead, taking deep breaths to calm himself, but his trembling fingers betrayed his inner turmoil. You owe me a child, Jennifer. Repay me once you've recovered. The absurdity of his words bordered on comical. I closed my eyes and ignored him. If you refuse an amicable divorce, then we'll settle this in court. His heavy breathing seemed to be suppressing anger, but he suddenly burst into laughter. I opened my eyes in surprise. Fine. He looked at me calmly, his eyes unreadable. I don't agree anyway. Might as well test how good our newly hired legal team is. I was momentarily speechless, biting my lip hard as I stared at him. A lawsuit was certainly the last resort. Who knew how long it could drag on? So take good care of yourself, or how else will you have the strength to fight the lawsuit? He reached out to stroke my lips, and when I dodged his touch, he didn't get angry. I'll have them make you something to eat. I watched him push the door open and leave. Knowing he only saw this as a fierce quarrel and revenge, I closed my eyes, utterly exhausted. But this was no true peach blossom spring. What could he possibly change? The table was laden with food. I wouldn't fight my own body, so I picked up a bowl and ate. Alexander pushed away the untouched dishes, his eyes never leaving me throughout the entire meal. No matter how nice this place is, it's just a countryside retreat. Rest for a couple of days, then go home. I'll hire someone to help Elsie take care of you. I set down my chopsticks and stood up. That's not my home anymore. If President Song has nothing else, you can leave first. He grabbed my arm, half supporting, half pulling. What exactly do you want? His phone rang, and just by watching the changing expressions on his face as he glanced at the screen, I could guess who it was. Strangely, I felt somewhat relieved at this moment. Bertha calling him back early to brainwash him might just make him agree to the agreement. He pushed open the door to take the call on the porch. Though it was hardly necessary, the old house had such poor soundproofing that even the voice on the other end was faintly audible. Mostly, It was complaints. Carol missed her dad, asking why he'd left on a long trip without telling her. Then came the accusation about me scolding her for making excuses. The gist being that someone like me would only grow more hostile toward Carol in the future. Listening made my eye twitch. There was no need to hear more, so I got up to help clear the plates instead. Then came Alexander's suppressed roar. "Why did you call her?" A stunned silence came through the receiver, followed by a wounded voice piercing through both phone and thin walls. "She's your wife, I'm your child's mother. If she's sowing discord, why shouldn't I confront her? You still remember she's my wife," he bellowed. "Nothing she says counts as sowing discord, Bertha." His roar carried a chilling edge. "You provoked her for no reason, mark my words. You'll pay for this." The sound of weeping instantly grew more distinct from the other side. "Alexander," Bertha shrieked in utter breakdown. "After all I've endured alongside you, is this how you treat me?" Exasperation dripped from his voice. "And how have you tormented me this whole time? Did your little performance in front of Carol backfire on you?" After a long silence, he spoke again. "You don't need to call again unless it's important. Carol's affairs will be reported to me by others. Watch your step if you bother my wife again. I won't be polite." He hung up and came inside, casually taking the plate from my hands while looking at me with unreadable eyes. "Why didn't you tell me she came to see you? I found it laughable. She'd provoked me in countless ways. What was this one incident worth? Now of all times, he suddenly descends like divine justice. Besides, hadn't her current lack of boundaries been nurtured step by step through his indulgence over these past 2 years? He understood my icy gaze, his eyes darkening further before he finally murmured, "My fault." Still physically weak, I felt waves of darkness clouding my vision. Shaking my head, I said, "I need to sleep." "Do as you please." He probably knew I would never allow him to sleep in the same room, so he paused and looked at me with a pleading expression. "Then, I'll go to the next room. Call me immediately if you need anything." The next morning, I was awakened by his incessant work calls. Seeing me get up, he immediately hung up the phone and stepped forward to help me. Looking somewhat guilty, I waved my hand in refusal. "Aren't you going back yet?" He had always been a workaholic. Only his daughter could make him stay away from the company for more than 3 days. He shook his head. "I'm not leaving. Breakfast is ready. I kept it warm for you." I grew impatient. "Alexander, what exactly do you want? Can't you just go back and wait for the subpoena?" I thought my attitude and actions had been clear enough, yet he still pretended to be clueless and tried to muddle through. He grabbed me as I turned to leave, pulling me into his arms and holding me tightly. "No, Jennifer." His chin rested on the crook of my neck, his hands completely ignoring my desperate attempts to pry them open. "I won't leave your side ever again. Who knows what else you might do." His voice was muffled. "You're the closest person to me." After a moment of silence, I said quietly, "Then what about Carol?" The question landed in the small courtyard like a stone, and even the breeze seemed to freeze for a moment. His arms around me loosened. This was the first time I had placed our marriage and his daughter in opposition to each other. In the past, I always thought that adorable little girl who sweetly called me Auntie Yin would at most become my child's half-sister. Sharing the same father meant blood would always be thicker than water, and they would support each other, thanks to her parents, who spent over 2 years tormenting me. I've learned it's far more complicated than that. "You pursued me, proposed to me." I turned around and smiled at him. "You just thought I was young, naive, and starved for affection unlike your other girlfriends. I wouldn't stop you from being nice to Carol, right?" He didn't expect me to be so blunt and stared at me in stunned silence. I waved my hand to cut off his imminent no, then took a deep breath. "I'm not blaming you for this. I have my own issues to deal with." I plunged headfirst into the river of his love and swam to my heart's content, heedless of others' warnings. From the very beginning, it was you who cast the second wife as Carol's enemy, who placed us on opposing sides, I said softly, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "You could have fulfilled your responsibilities with me. Yet time and again you chose to race ahead with Bertha, leaving me so far behind you couldn't even see my shadow, knowing you could always coax me back later. You pushed this division until it shattered us completely, and now you still believe I'm forcing you to choose." He finally came to his senses a bit and still tried to reach out to hug me, but I stepped back to avoid him. "It's my fault. You always thought Carol was innocent." I smiled bitterly. "But you're innocent too, and our child even more so." He suddenly spoke up. I was somewhat surprised that he would say such a thing. Had this thought occurred to him a year earlier, perhaps we wouldn't have come to this point. But I shook my head, my bitter smile deepening. "I'm not innocent, Alexander." I coveted the warmth of a man with marital experience, never considering that experience comes with entanglements. How could the world offer me so many perfect bargains? But my March is truly innocent, so innocent it makes my heart bleed. I've already paid the bill. The memory of that day still makes me tremble all over. You signed the agreement. From now on you can still be Carol's good father. Of course you could remarry to give her a complete. He interrupted me with a trembling voice. Impossible. I know I was terribly wrong. Jennifer, you're truly heartbroken. He hung his head and said gloomily, I'll change. I promise I'll change everything. I knew forcing him to sign now would be useless. Having talked it through, I decided to let him calm down and turned to go to the main hall. Breakfast had also been arranged by him, nothing but blood-nourishing porridges, soups, and pastries. The cooking aunt smiled and praised him, saying he had come early in the morning to ask her how to properly nourish someone after a miscarriage, giving one instruction after another. I stirred the soup in silence. His grief for the lost child echoed among these bowls and plates, clear to my ears. But what's done is done. There was nothing left to bind us together anymore. In the afternoon, he took a few calls and explained to me that there was an urgent matter at the company, since I wasn't fit for long-distance travel yet. He advised me to rest a few more days. After bringing more supplies into the kitchen with careful instructions, he hurried off. I could only breathe a sigh of relief. If he stayed any longer, it would just be awkward for both of us. Only after settling down did I realize how pleasant the scenery here truly was. Free from willow catkins drifting about, leisurely and peaceful, calming myself, I reinserted my old SM card and reached out to a few colleagues. Attempting to handle some work remotely, the constant chime of text notifications sounded, and I assumed they were just delayed spam messages until I finally glanced at them moments later. Aside from the astonishing number of Alexander's missed calls and text messages, there were constant reminders of bank transfers. The timing roughly started from the day I was discharged from the hospital. He transferred money every day, none of the amounts insignificant. With the most recent transaction having just arrived, I sighed. The divorce agreement had already allocated our savings. What he earned was his to keep, and I wouldn't take a penny more. He was using this approach to bluntly tell me he wouldn't divorce. I called him, and he answered instantly. Jennifer, are you feeling unwell? His voice sounded tense on the other end. No. I pressed my lips together. Stop sending me money. It's unnecessary and just creates complications. It's not a complication, it's my sincerity. The muffled noise of a meeting could be heard in the background as he deliberately lowered his voice, then added with a hint of amusement, besides, you'll understand whether it's necessary or not. I'm still busy here, so I'll hang up now. I soon learned the reason behind that smile. Bertha called me in the evening. Since it was an unfamiliar number, I only answered after it persistently rang for the third time, hearing her voice on the phone. I immediately wanted to hang up, but my finger hovering over the red button was stopped by a soft hello. Auntie Yin. Hello, Carol, I said gently, then spoke impatiently to Bertha as she took the phone. What do you want? Bertha's voice sounded even more restrained than mine. I'll send you the bank details and account holder information. What? I was taken aback, Alexander said. She forced out the words through gritted teeth on the other end. Starting this month, you'll be responsible for my living expenses and child support. I'll either come to you for it each month or wait for your transfer. Now I somewhat understood this was what he meant by sincerity during our phone call. Mr. Yin, don't think for a second you've got him completely under your thumb. Bertha, hearing my silence, probably thought I was gloating and said coldly, Carol will always be the apple of his eye. You'd better not stand in the way, or it'll be ugly for everyone. I let out a helpless chuckle. This wasn't my idea. If you want money, don't come to me. I hung up the phone and didn't go find Alexander either. Bertha would go tattle. But when he called that evening, it wasn't to settle scores with me. Did she yell at you? The sound of keyboard tapping and printer humming came from over there. He was still at the office. Yet his voice through the receiver was gentle. If she continues to be so tactless in the future, just hold her back. Carol's expenses are managed separately by the nanny, so you don't need to worry. His tone turned colder again. If she had any self-respect, she wouldn't take Carol's money. I don't know the specifics of their divorce agreement, but I vaguely remember that apart from the property, Bertha received a lump sum alimony payment, while Carol's was calculated separately. But Bertha soon said that Carol was too young and needed full-time care. Demanding an additional monthly allowance, Alexander didn't argue with her. As long as their daughter was well taken care of, as someone who came later, I never interfered with this family of three's financial matters before, and now there's even less reason to. Don't act on your own. I don't have that much free time, I said coldly. His tone softened again. Jennifer, I know I've been in too much contact with Carol and Bertha before, and I'm reflecting and adjusting. If you really don't like her, I'll find someone else to manage it. I won't contact her again without your permission from now on. Okay. I remained silent for a long moment. I've drafted another agreement based on what you sent back and emailed it to you. The breathing on the other end grew rapid, and he called out urgently, but I hung up the phone. After hanging up, I thought for a moment and then called Bertha. She must have just had an argument with Alexander too. Her voice trembling with tears, but somehow, this time she didn't dare to say anything harsh, as if holding back with great effort. What do you want? We opened the door to face each other. I'm divorcing Alexander, and the baby's gone too. If you still have the same idea as before, give him a push, everyone will be happy. The news clearly stunned her into momentary silence. I hung up the phone, breathing heavily with guilt. I knew she would definitely use Carol to pester Alexander. I didn't want to drag this innocent child into it either, but Alexander was clearly playing soft tie-kai with me. This was the only way. Breaking up and divorce, just like when I cut ties with my family years ago, are things you can't afford to drag out. No matter how painful, you have to act fast. He actually quieted down for a few days, probably torn between work and his daughter, which finally gave me some peace of mind. Once Carol wears him down and his stubbornness fades, he'll naturally agree to sign. As the long holiday neared its end, work started pressing, so I returned to Y City, just finished a meeting at the company and was heading downstairs with a stack of documents, my mind a tangled mess as I tried to sort through the chaos, when I saw Alexander. Amid the lush green trees and cool grey shadows, spring's warmth enveloped us as he leaned against his car door, watching me. I had already unlinked his account from the recorder and hadn't told him I was back. So I eyed him suspiciously, wondering if he'd planted a tracker somewhere. He seemed to read my mind and walked over in a few steps. I bribed your receptionist just to have her notify me when you sent a message. Don't think so poorly of me. He tried to pull me into the passenger seat of his car. In my resistance, I noticed the child safety seat had been removed from the back row. Taking advantage of my distraction, he pressed me into the seat and shut the passenger door. After getting in himself, he buckled my seatbelt, bringing us abruptly close, almost nose to nose. I always loved kissing the corner of his forehead during our newlywed days. He murmured softly, "From now on, I'll use the company car to pick up Carol. I'll sell this one and get a new one." After some thought, I realized he probably felt Bertha had used this car too often before, and wanted to completely leave the past behind. After explaining, he still didn't return to the driver's seat, his eyes holding a trace of desperate hope, as if waiting for me to smile and stroke his hair like before, to kiss him while murmuring about where we'd go for dinner that evening. I turned my head away from his hopeful gaze and reached to push open the car door. He turned back, stepped on the gas, and started the car. Only after a long while did he finally speak, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Did you tell Bertha yourself?" His hands gripping the steering wheel were so tight that veins bulged, his voice heavy as iron. Perhaps it was only at this very moment that he became utterly convinced. We were nearly finished. The drive passed in silence until he pulled over at the Lakeside Cafe. The scenery here remained unchanged, save for the owner's golden retriever, now fully grown, frolicking across the grass. That fake willow tree was kept by the boss that very year. She said it looked nice and saved her the trouble of maintenance. Now several peach trees have been added nearby, blooming exuberantly on their own, their overlapping branches creating a scene of radiant spring. Bubbles filled the sky, blending with the springtime air over the lush green grass. It wasn't hard to guess whose handiwork this was. Alexander embraced me from behind. "Jennifer. This is what they call willows dense and flowers bright." I pried his hands away and turned to look at him, unable to suppress a bitter smile. "Why bother? Still, it's good to come here." Choosing a spot beneath the tree to sit, I took out the velvet jewelry box from my bag and handed it to him. "I've been carrying this with me for days, always meaning to give it to you. This place feels just right for it." It was his engagement ring, given to me by him here 2 years ago, and now returned to him in the same place. He refused to take it, his face paling slightly. "Jennifer." I placed the box on the table and pushed it toward him, about to say something to console him, when he suddenly stood up, grabbed my hand, and knelt on one knee before my seat, just like under that tree years ago. Startled, I glanced around. The owner gave me a reassuring look and led the golden retriever away. "What are you doing?" I reached out to pull him up. "Just say whatever you need to say properly." He refused to rise, instead pressing his forehead tightly against the back of my hand. "Last time I was here, I begged you to marry me. Today I'm here to beg you for another chance." His voice choked with sobs. I didn't doubt his sincerity and genuine feelings at this moment, no different from 2 years ago. But why choose remorse at the execution ground when one could simply refrain from sin beforehand? I've given you chance after chance, Alexander, I said wearily, closing my eyes. Not just the choices at parting count as opportunities, do they? Carol fell ill, he could have gone with me to help care for her. Instead of moving straight into Bertha's place, Bertha got drunk, he could have asked her friend to look after her for the night. Instead of immediately abandoning his wife, with a child, he could have taught Carol to be an elder sister openly, rather than hiding her away like something shameful. Too many choices. And each time he chose the path without me, drifting further away. How could he return now? There's no going back. I was wrong. He forced out the words, his knees never moving an inch. These days I've been thinking, if only I had been more measured, if only I had realized sooner that you were the most important person to me, if only I hadn't hurt your heart time and again, how wonderful we could have been, and our child would still be here. I'm sorry, Jennifer. I'm sorry, so sorry. He kissed my hand repeatedly, tears lingering in his eyes. I love you, truly love you. His lips trembled with the confession, filled with reluctance. I withdrew my hand, wiped away my tears, and simply looked at him quietly. Desperation deepened in his eyes. If, I say if, I give a sum of money to Bertha and never interfere with that side again, Jennifer, would there still be a chance for us? I nearly laughed at his desperation, knowing he was clutching at straws. Gazing at his bloodshot eyes, leaving aside that you could never truly abandon Carol, I would never build my marriage on the foundation of crushing another mother and daughter. Everything could have been perfect, yet we've come to such a pass. I sighed and motioned for him to get up. Let's just leave it at that, Alexander. You're exhausted too. He didn't move, his eyes bloodshot, his voice squeezed out from deep in his throat. Just like that. I don't know how much time passed. But the coffee before us both had gone cold, the latte art smeared like tear-streaked faces. At last, he tremblingly stood up and reached for the ring box. As if using all his strength, he slid the wedding ring off his own finger and placed it beside mine. Closing the box, he called for the owner, his voice hoarse. Please, bury them for us under that willow tree. The boss understood and took it, his brows showing no lack of regret, but he nodded in agreement without saying anything. Only asking if we wanted more food. I shook my head and looked at him, whose face had already turned ashen. Then I'll take my leave first, there's still a lot to do since I just got back. Wait for me, he called out to stop me. He went to the car and returned with a black lacquered box edged with bronze patterns, handing it to me with a weighty gesture. I took it and opened it to find a golden Celine longevity lock, dazzlingly radiant. I instantly realized who he had bought it for. And in that moment, my nose stung and my vision blurred. Take it, I bought it the day I found out. Originally, his voice seemed to float from far away, falling to the ground along with those bubbles. It was his father who wronged him. It's for March. I used my fingertips to brush away the tears welling in the corners of my eyes and nodded to show I'd accepted it. Anything else you want to tell me? The corners of his lips struggled to lift into a faint smile. He probably knew we wouldn't meet again. I gazed at him, his features blurred before my eyes, and in the end, I still shook my head. We've come this far, there's nothing left to say. He smiled bitterly. I understand. We parted ways at the cafe entrance. I went to find LCS temporary storage warehouse to officially move my things. As I left, I felt the heat of his gaze on my back. I quickened my pace without turning around. Late that night, his assistant called to say he was dead drunk at the midnight snack place where we'd first dined together, asking if I could check on him or pick him up. Sitting in my new home surrounded by cardboard boxes, I watched the bright moon hanging outside the window. I won't be going. Take good care of him. 3 days later, my assistant brought me the divorce papers with his signature. 6 months later, my request for a European assignment was approved. I heard that seaside town has eternal spring, with sunlight as gentle as satin. The only regret is it's too far and the position too demanding. Returning would be difficult. Kate had tears in her eyes at the little tavern on the eve of her departure, ran off alone. I squeezed her hand, smiling tipsily. From now on I'll be your personal shopping agent. Isn't that sweet? She was also quite drunk, chattering away about all the gossip she'd heard over the past 6 months. Alexander won the lawsuit and secured custody of Carol. The father and daughter now live in that little villa, looking rather like they'll be leaning on each other for the rest of their lives. Bertha had long squandered the alimony she had on hand, and her relentless pestering yielded no results. Alexander refused to let her see their daughter frequently. Claiming that Carol had already picked up some of her bad habits, throwing tantrums and demanding things as a reflex, he devoted most of his energy to the household, vowing to set the child straight. Kate recently heard that Bertha couldn't find work and had sold her house to return to her hometown. Now, she could only wait for Carol to grow up and seek her out. Kate poured more wine, her drunken eyes glazed as she looked at me. Who knows if it's for Carol or for you, old man? I tilted my head back and downed the cup, the minty sharpness stinging tears from my eyes. It's none of my business anymore. The day of departure was deep autumn, yet the weather was uncommonly clear and fine. I knew it wasn't just Kate who came to see me off. That figure hid beneath a distant pillar, concealed within layers of lingering gazes. I just smiled and picked up the half-year-old fluffy puppy wearing a longevity lock. Its great black eyes darted around excitedly, tongue lolling out. Completely unaware it was about to soar tens of thousands of feet into the sky. March. We're going where the sun shines brightest. Okay, the end.